Okay, I'm going to do the next bit of discussion on the flasher units, mainly talking about the components and a little bit of the development so far. There'll be a third part where I describe exactly the circuit diagram and so on. So what I've done on this one is I've drilled into the LED and just inserted some of the optic fiber just to see what that looks like. It works, but it's not the most, you certainly don't have that brightness of an LED at the end there. I can demonstrate that quickly, but just an experiment, we'll see. Now how was that? What was that like that? No. Okay, there, that's flashing. Now you'll notice at the end, sorry, the connections are just a little bit difficult holding it on the battery there. Okay, so the point being that if you managed to get this out through the end of the wing and just out at the tip of a nav light there, it would work and probably be quite scale, but it certainly isn't the same brightness as the LED itself. Okay, then what I did was I did quite a condensed version, soldering this up. Now obviously that's almost impossible to follow what I've done inside there. I just wanted to get an idea of how compact I could get that. Don't look at where these wires are going. Obviously they're not all going to go into the cockpit area. We're looking more at the arrangement of those components right there, and that can fit very comfortably, and you can make it even flatter, and it can get right out of the way into the tail area, or in fact even into the nose area there if you wanted to. And the LEDs, of course, get positioned in wherever in the wings or wherever you want them. In the event that you're going to use the optic fiber, well, then this LED could be positioned somewhere there or there, with the various optic fibers coming out of it, feeding the light through. So that's a compact version. That one works. And then next I'm going to just talk about the components a little bit. So we've got two transistors, a capacitor and a resistor, and they can vary slightly depending on, for instance, as I mentioned in the previous video, my slower flash unit has got slightly different components than the slightly faster flashing unit. In the end, the one that I'm going to recommend is this one, but I'll list the components for the other one as well. So when you buy resistors, you'll see them in packs like that and that. They've usually got markings on them, so keep them in there. 300 kilo ohm, 680 kilo ohm, for instance. And if you're lucky, you can find an entire pack, and they're very cheap. So what I got was sort of a mixed pack, which got a whole variety, which sort of fitted the regions that I was looking for. Otherwise, you can just go to your local electronics shop and pick the individual items that you want, which is more efficient. And after you've examined the video and seen what you'd like to get, that'll at least give you an idea of what you want to get from your electronics shop. The capacitors, so again, an entire packet of a whole variety of capacitors, about 10 in a packet, which gave me the option to play around with a couple of capacitances and so on. And So I've got the two. The one is a 22 microfarad and the other one is a 33 microfarad. So that's the two that I'll be recommending in the video. But of course you can play around with numbers and get and do something close, something slightly different. The resistors, 330 kilo ohm, and I've written them all out on a page here, and I will be putting that up for perusal. So 300 kilo ohm, 680 kilo ohm, the 33 microfarad, the 22 microfarad. I'll put all of this up, including discussing the circuit diagram. So when you are looking at transistors, again, I saw that these were available in little box sets from electronic stores, a whole variety, and the numbers that were supplied on them were numbers that didn't initially mean anything to me, which were different from the original circuit diagram that I'd studied for making these initial ones. And the point that I'm making here is transistors have equivalents, and you can look up online. You can type in, for instance, whatever number was recommended to you. So for instance, even if I on my video recommend a 2N222 or 4 twos, or a 2N3906, which I will be using, so I'll be using those two. You might not have them listed under those names, so there are other names, for instance BC557 and BC547. They might differ slightly in certain features of the transistor. There's quite a number of characteristics, some of which don't matter that much. You get PNP transistors and NPN, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, as for the three legs. But without getting into details on the electronics, and as I said, I'm not an electronics buff, the only thing that was of interest to me is I was able to get a box of transistors, try and find the equivalents to the original YouTube video which I had watched. I did find the equivalents, and I started testing them out, and I bought boxes of LEDs. Again, much cheaper to buy, say, 100 or 200 or 500 even, than selecting maybe 10. Now, the one thing that's important to note, and this is maybe one of the more critical areas of this flasher unit, is that LEDs don't all have 3-volt voltage, and these two boxes that I have here have a something like from 2.5, 2.6, 2.7, 2.8 volt voltage. And what happens is, and I did it with that one, if you put that onto the battery, you get one flash and then it's burnt out. So when you get LEDs for your aircraft, obviously keep in mind that you want to make it convenient to use the 1.5 making 3-volt batteries, and generally making the whole circuit 3 volts. It probably could work if you were able to do a 2.8 volt supply on your circuit. I'm just going to stick for convenience with that, which means that I had to stick with the 3-volt LEDs. And if I wanted to use all of these other nice ones that I bought, I have to modify my power supply slightly. Or, as some of you who are slightly knowledgeable in electronics would know, of course you can still make a circuit that'll provide a 2.7 volt or whatever, how many volts you wanted, by adding in extra resistors onto the circuit to drop your voltage. So I will be doing better arrangements. Oh, by the way, on the transistors, this writing is so absolutely tiny on there. What I did is I painted it white, just with a little bit of acrylic white, and then once that was dry, I just rubbed it off again so that shone a little bit whiter than that. whiter than what they had it, at least you can try and read it, but it's really, really tiny. Definitely not the easiest. I will also be giving you a little bit of a rundown on reading resistors. And it's slightly easier said than done, because some of the colors quoted, when you actually look at it on there, that isn't quite what you thought you were seeing. For instance, sometimes a gold paint can actually look brownish on here. Sometimes a tan and a grey are not easy to see the difference. Sometimes on this color background, for instance, a blue and a black might be a little bit tricky to read, which is why I said certainly make sure that you have the markings, and then you can cross-reference online. You can Google 300 kilo ohm resistor, you can Google 680 kilo ohm resistor, you can Google 380 kilo ohm resistor colors, and it'll you'll get a whole lot of help. You can Google the exact specifications of each and every component if you were interested in doing that. I'm not particularly interested. I did a little bit of it just to try and understand the circuit in the first place, but it's not like I'm trying to get into electronics just to be able to have a flasher circuit on my aircraft. After step one of explaining the basic components is the first steps in connecting them, and that I will explain in the next video a little bit, but I've done steps one, which is soldering a couple of the legs together and shortening it and starting to get it ready for a slightly more compact unit. Of course, if you're following this video for radio control, then there's nothing wrong with just giving yourself all the space required. The most difficult of all aspects of soldering this is when three items come into one. So if you solder two of them onto each other and then you want to solder the third one on, it'll usually pop the other two off again because they'll be under some bit of tension. And I might speak about the soldering in a separate video, but I mean, you know, I'm not, soldering is a bit up for you to practice yourself and get used to how you're going to sort of hold the pieces down, let them touch with no pressure against them, and solder. Because if you're forcing them together, as soon as you let it go, or if you desolder it later, it'll just splay open and not the ideal way to solder. After doing this compact one, I don't think it was necessarily the easiest way, so when I do this one I'll just be looking at getting a bit of an easier way of doing it, so that other folks that want to follow can. So we will also look at laying these optic fibers in future videos, and while I was doing this I was looking at the formation lights on the underside, and when you've got a item where the formation lights are all on, which I believe they were, someone can correct me, but I think all the formation lights were on at the same time. Not actually, I must check that up. For the model purposes, of course, I'd be surprised if anyone cares whether they were all on or only some on. So if you put your optic fiber items, or if you use the original piece, you can light them all up just with a single LED, or if you really wanted to, you could put individual LEDs. It doesn't have to be this large one, it could have been smaller ones. You can even get ones that just about almost fit out of there themselves, but I'd still possibly recommend using the original plastic piece and then putting these in behind it. And that doesn't need the flasher unit because these were just constant. And if you're wanting to give power supply to constant lights as well as flashing lights, you just run an independent circuit, so that doesn't need to be part of it. It'll still be connected to your batteries, and we'll be speaking about batteries on a micro switch, because one of the things you've got to sort of ask yourself is whether you want wires coming out of your aeroplane to an external supply, or if you want to put your battery inside, and if you do, how would you ever change it? So probably the recommended way is wires going to the outside. Okay, that was just a quick update on that.